So in keeping with our media theme, we have two nationally known speakers with us who take an even broader approach to reaching the masses. They are policy experts with decades of experience, both leading, analyzing, and writing about our politics and the economy. And if there was ever a year to try and make sense of both, it's this year. Tonight, we have with us two of the most thoughtful and provocative commentators from the national stage. First, it's an honor to introduce Steve Moore, who formerly wrote on the economy and public policy for the Wall Street Journal. Currently, he's a distinguished visiting fellow for the Project for Economic Growth at the Heritage Foundation. He also founded Club for Growth. Now, I've been Steve's warm-up act before. And I think I had to stretch it because there was an airport or flight delay in there. Anyway, let me just say it's much better to be the warm-up act because Steve is one of the most engaging speakers, saying things that most of us are thinking but just can't always articulate. In fact, he recently had this to say. There was a time in America, and it wasn't even that long ago, that liberals actually cared about working class people. They may have been misguided in many of their policy solutions, such as raising the minimum wage, but at least their heart was in the right place. Then a strange thing happened about a decade ago. Now I'll let him tell the rest of the story. And for those of you who are tweeting, follow him at Stephen Moore. Please welcome our friend, Steve Moore. Okay. It's also an honor for me to welcome the other half of our dynamic guest speaker duo. You've probably known John Fund from his 2 decades he spent at the Wall Street Journal. Currently, he is the national affairs columnist for National Review, and he is a prolific writer, with his work appearing in Esquire, Reader's Digest, Reason, and the New Republic. And in 2004, he wrote a fabulous, albeit slightly frightening book, Stealing Elections: How Voter Fraud Threatens Our Democracy. And just recently, he had this to say. Donald Trump may not know much about policy, but he is a genius at brand extension, marketing, and the intimidation and bullying of opponents. He is the political equivalent of a shark. He swims in waters that he makes turbulent and in which he is the chief predator. He eats and he survives. He knows that deep in the American psyche, people love a winner. And as Green Bay Packers coach Vince Lombardi used to say, winning isn't everything. It's the only thing. Follow him on Twitter at John Fund. Please welcome our friend, John Fund. And now it's my pleasure to bring back on stage my boss, President of the Independence Institute, John Caldera.
All right, those were really nice introductions. What about yours? But you need to know the truth. One of the great things about John Fund that you probably do not know is that he was one of the original Star Trek fans who started one of the first Star Trek conventions. More importantly, he worked in Hollywood, and one of his claims to fame was he passed along the script for Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Without him, we would not have Mr. Spicoli. The best thing about Steve Moore is that he came once to our alcohol, tobacco, and firearms party where we smoke, drink, and shoot, sadly not in that order, to celebrate the the perks of adulthood. And Steve couldn't shoot his foot if he tried. We actually had to lay the clay pigeons down on it was embarrassing, just embarrassing that such a great defender of freedom it was just embarrassing. And to the point where one person leaned over to me and said, "You know, he says he writes for the Wall Street Journal, but I think he writes for the New York Times." I tell you what, why don't we start it, and why don't each of you grab a microphone here. Let me just start off with the question that I think is on everyone's mind. What happened this year? I mean, how did this happen, this being Trump?
Well, maybe I'll go first. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. John, thanks for the invitation. I love everything about the Independent Institute except for John Caldera. Just kidding. Really, what you guys have done here in this state has been amazing, John. And I think it's hard to sort of appreciate how important these state think tanks are. John and I spend a lot of time around the country with the state think tanks, every state from Maine to California. And this network that John has really helped create, because so many of these other state think tanks were really modeled after the success of the Independence Institute, have been amazing winners and victors in this fight for freedom. And we don't always win in Washington. In fact, I'd say in most cases we don't win, but we're winning huge victories in the states. It's amazing to see. I mean, just give you one example. In just the last 4 or 5 years, we've had 4 states that have become right-to-work states. And those states are Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, and West Virginia. Now, are you right to work here in Colorado?
No.
Come on, John, get with the program. I mean,
Well, on the bright side, we have almost no private unions.
We're going to work together to make Colorado the 26th right-to-work state in the United States and give every worker freedom. It's hugely important for the growth of the state, but what you've done is amazing. I'll just tell you one quick story that I think tells you everything about the election, then hand it over to John. About 6 months ago, back in around November, I got a call from Jeb Bush. And I knew Jeb Bush very well when he was governor of Florida, an outstanding governor, one of the best governors we've had in the last 30 years of any state. Did education reform and tax cuts and balanced the budget, and just a leader in almost every area. Spectacular job. And so I said, "Yes, Jeb, absolutely. I'll meet you anywhere you want to, anytime. You tell me when, and I'll be there." And it turned out we were both going to be in Phoenix, Arizona at the same time. And he said, "Well, why don't you come to this little event that I'm having, and after the event is over, we can sit down and chat." So I said, "Sure." And I showed up at the Biltmore Hotel, and room C, the ballroom C, and I walk in, and there's about 25 or 30 people in the room, and they're all kind of carrying cocktails and so on. And quite frankly, it was kind of a lifeless event. And then Jeb Bush gets up and gives some remarks, and quite frankly, they were kind of flat. There wasn't a lot there. And then everybody left, and when everybody left, I was thinking, gee, this is what Jeb Bush has been doing for the last year or two. He's going to these events with 25 or 30 people, and everyone who went to that event probably paid $50,000 to get in the room. So he walked out with $1 million, and he amassed this huge, mountain of cash to try to intimidate the others from beating him. And then about 3 or 4 weeks after this, I got a call from my friend Corey Lewandowski, who was then just named the campaign manager for Donald Trump. "Would you like to meet with Mr. Trump?" "Yes, absolutely, I'd like to meet with him." Unlike John, I had never met him before, and I wanted to see what he was talking about, what he was doing, and meet him in person. So he said, "Well, why don't you come to this event we're going to do in Dallas, Texas?" This was in early December. "And we're going to have a little rally there, and after the rally is over, you can sit down and talk to Mr. Trump." So I said, "Sure, I'll be there. Where is it?" "Well, it's going to be at the Love Field in Dallas at the airport, and it'll be at Hangar C." So I fly into Dallas. I walk over to this hangar, having no idea what to expect, and I walk over there, and all of a sudden I see 6,000 people. 6,000 5,000 people waiting for Donald Trump to fly in. And I talked to I got there about 45 minutes before the event started, so I started just chatting with these people, and amazing people. I mean, these are salt-of-the-earth people, incredibly patriotic, great Americans. They were construction workers, and they were policemen and women, and they were soccer moms, and they were a motorcycle. People drove their motorcycles there. A lot of veterans. Surprisingly, a lot of blacks were in the audience, and just people who were pro-America. They loved America, and they were concerned about the direction of this country. Well, Trump flies in on his plane, and you could see, Trump on the side of the plane, and he parks his plane. Little stairs, he gets off, and people are in a frenzy now. Oh my God, he's here, And he walks down, he gets into his black limousine. The limo drives him 200 yards from the plane over to this place where there's a raised, where all the people are waiting, and it's like Mick Jagger has shown up at a Rolling Stones concert, and he gets out of the car, and he's a very big man, and he looks very presidential with his red tie and white shirt, and he gets up and he's looking at the crowd, and he walks up these steps and looks out at these adoring people. Now people are truly in a frenzy, and he looks out at these folks. And he puts his hands on the podium and he says, "You are my people." And it was just an amazing event. It was a cultural event that I've never seen anything like. Now, I think there's a lesson in that story of these two presidential candidates, because if we were in this room a year ago, the betting was that who was going to be the Republican nominee. Everybody bet that it was going to be Jeb Bush, and maybe it should have been. Jeb, if he were to become president, I think he'd be a great president. But it shows the difference. That story tells you about what happened this year. Jeb Bush thought he was going to buy this election. He thought he could just go to the millionaires and billionaires of the party, collect checks, and somehow he would have so much money, he would intimidate everybody, and he would be the chosen one. And why wouldn't he think so? I mean, if you go back the last 50 years, John knows this, I've heard you say this many times, the one thing the Republicans have done unfailingly for the last 50 years is we as Republicans have always chosen the one who is next in line. Right? So we chose, Nixon, and then that was Ford, and then it was Reagan, and then it was George Bush Sr., and then it was Bob Dole, and then it was, George W. Bush, and then it was John McCain, and then it was Mitt Romney. In this time, it was Jeb Bush's turn, but something amazing happened. And Donald Trump came in like a tornado. He went out and talked to real voters. And just the one thing to think about, because I know there are people in this room, some of you are very pro-Trump. I've talked to many of you who say you'll never vote for Trump ever. But one thing to think about, Donald Trump got something this year that nobody else got. We started with, 16 or 17 candidates. He understood and he tapped into a voter rage that we have not seen in this country in a long, long time. And these are voters, the Trump voters, those people who went to those rallies. They believed that they were betrayed, not just by Democrats, but by Republican leaders as well. And they had lost faith in the Republican Congress. And by the way, what happened in December, I think the seeds for this revolution, and this is the biggest political upset in the last 50 years, Donald Trump winning this nomination. I think the seeds were sown when the Republican Congress that had just been elected with big majorities for the first time in a long time passed that god-awful omnibus spending bill. Remember that one that passed in December? That budget was a betrayal of everything Republicans said they would do. And for a lot of Americans, I think that was what set the stage for this kind of revolution, and we'll see where it goes. I'll turn it over to John.
I echo Steve's comments. I'll just add a couple of my own. Throughout the world, we are seeing a complete discrediting of establishments. Every European country is going through this, some with movements to the left, some with movements to the nationalistic right. And rooted in this collapse of confidence in authority is the modern disease of stagnation. We're back with Jimmy Carter, but in slow motion. The Financial Times had a major piece on its front page today, a survey of America's 229 major metropolitan areas. In 80% of them, since the year 2000, median family income has declined. Denver's an exception. You're doing pretty well. You've reinvented your economy. After all, we're sitting in a neighborhood that 16 years ago you wouldn't want to walk around at night very easily. Although I must say, John, holding an Independence Institute event in a neighborhood that's now called Rhino is a little suspect. Having said that, if you're in the middle class, you've been trampled upon. Obama has only made that worse because with the Federal Reserve policies he encouraged, which meant trillions of dollars injected into the economy, and with his other policies which have destroyed the entrepreneurial ability to grow new jobs, real jobs that aren't part-time jobs, we have seen people who own stocks and assets are doing okay. Things are rising. But if you rely on wage income, you're sending your kid to community college where your first kid was going to private college or a state school. You may be not able to buy a house for 10 years versus 5 years when you start out. A whole bunch of changes are being made, and people feel powerless and they feel betrayed. So I call the Trump phenomenon and the Bernie Sanders phenomenon the revolt against authority. Because just remember, Donald Trump is viewed as negatively by 65% of the population, but Hillary Clinton is viewed negatively by 59% of the population. So we are dealing with a contest where if it turns out as it looks, and we can talk about whether things might change suddenly, but if it turns out if it looks, we're going to be having a choice between the evil of two lessers. By the way, we also are trending towards simplicity in politics. I will make a prediction tonight that is absolutely guaranteed to be the case if Trump and Clinton are the nominees. The next president of the United States will be 69 years old. They will be from New York, and they will be not natural blondes.
All right, so let me see if I got this. We've got Steve saying that this is betrayal. You're saying that it's stagnation. We've been through betrayal from Republicans forever. No less when George W. was president and the size of government grew faster than when LBJ was president. We've gone through stagnation. Neither one of those has resulted in this type of upheaval. What's so different and why so angry?
I want to hand it over to Steve. I'll just say, one of the things is our politics has changed. We now have a complete merger of reality television with presidential politics. I mean, when the campaign chairman of Donald Trump's campaign, Paul Manafort, says Donald Trump's campaign is the biggest reality TV show in American politics, you know things have changed. He is running a reality TV show campaign. Now, here's where it matters. Donald Trump had 93% name identification when he announced for president. The next highest name identification among the Republican candidates was Jeb Bush, who happens to have a famous name. He was only at 73. Then you had to go down to 53, and that was Chris Christie, and everybody else trailed down below that. Trump was such a presence because of The Apprentice and CNBC and all of the things he's done in his life that he dominated the field immediately, and the media flocked to him. Remember, he got 20 times the coverage of his next most covered opponent in the primaries. Now, we can argue about whether that was justified or not, but he dominated everything. And the media was happy to do it because the ratings went up. Hillary Clinton actually had a reverse problem. She had 94% name ID, which meant everyone in the country knew who she was and they were tired of her. Because she was old news, old hat. And I mean, let's face it, I mean, scandal after scandal after scandal. I mean, her middle name is redacted, I think.
Can Donald Trump be trusted? That is, trusted with nuclear codes, trusted with making a choice for Supreme Court justice.
Nuclear war is bad for ratings. He's fine.
All right. But Putin might enjoy it. Do you trust him? And which time do you trust him? He has said both sides of every single issue.
Well, it's Steve's turn, of course.
It's Steve's turn, of course.
I don't know. I don't know if we can trust Donald Trump. I'll say a couple things about why this happened and why we are where we're at. First of all, on the Democratic side, for all the problems that we have on the Republican side, we did something important in our party that the Democrats didn't do, and now they realize with horror the mistake they made. We realized as a party that the American people did not want another Bush, right? People decided, we're done with the Bushes. And look, I like George W. Bush, and I thought, I consider him a friend, but the people just said, we've had enough of the Bushes. But you know what? The people have also said something else. They don't want another Clinton. And this is a big, big problem for her. The American people don't want another Clinton. John and I know, one other quick thing to know about Hillary. John and I have known Hillary for a long time. I always say there have been 3 politicians in my lifetime who've just risen above the rest in terms of their ability to fill up a room and connect with the American people, great communicators. Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. There's something about those 3 that just connected in an incredible way with the American people and made them unbeatable. And as great as Ronald Reagan, a president as he was, and look, I believe that Ronald Reagan should be on Mount Rushmore. Even he couldn't hold a candle to Bill Clinton. I mean, that was a president who could literally and figuratively charm your pants off, right? I mean, he could. But here's the good news. Here is the good news. That X factor, charisma, whatever you want to call it, Hillary does not have it. She doesn't have it. She is the ice queen, and that's why I think she's going to be defeated.
Just to add to what
Yeah.
Steve said, Steve and I both know someone who used to work for Hillary. We've been on television with that person.
And that person's name is?
I temporarily forget. John, the only way I survive is when I tell a source that's off the record, I actually keep my word. This person who knows Hillary...
You can tell me. I
Yes.
won't tell anyone.
Exactly. This person who has worked for Hillary for many, many years basically said you could walk through her deepest charisma and not get your ankles wet.
Now, look, your question was, can we trust Trump? And I don't know.
I haven't gotten to that one.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'll just say a couple things. I mean, I'm not here to sell you on Donald Trump. I mean, I would never tell people how to vote. And there are positives and negatives with Donald Trump, no question about it. And I think if he wins, he will change the Republican Party. There are a lot of traditional Republicans, many in this room, who will in no cases ever vote for Donald Trump, and he will lose those voters. But in my opinion, he's got a great chance of bringing in literally millions, if not tens of millions, of working class Americans who normally vote Democrat, who could cross over and vote for him. And that means, I don't think Colorado's a tough state, or a different state, but I do think Donald Trump can crash through what's called the blue wall, which is these states that the Democrats have dominated year after year after year, election after election. Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Iowa, Wisconsin. Trump can win all those states, and I'd even make the case Trump could possibly win in New York. It changes the map. But he has got to persuade people. I mean, somebody said this when we were talking in the reception. It was a perceptive thing. You know what the best thing Donald Trump could do right now throughout the rest of the campaign to win? Just shut up. Right? Just don't say anything anymore. If he just keeps quiet,
And
he's
the
got a
odds
good
of
chance
that?
of winning. Very low.
Look, here's the good news. There's a honeymoon period now for the next 9 weeks before the Cleveland Convention, in which Donald Trump has the opportunity to unify the party, which he says he wants to do, become more, quote, presidential, unquote, whatever that means, put together a team, start raising the money that he's going to need, because remember, he only self-funded in the primary. That's all gone now. Now he's raising money from lobbyists, and his chief fundraisers from Goldman Sachs. So he has a honeymoon period to close the deal. He might be able to do it. But I will say, I've known Donald Trump for 30 years. I've been to Mar-a-Lago. My company paid for the hotel bill. It wasn't a freebie. I've been on the jet. I've had dinner with him. He's never insulted me, despite what I've written about him. We get along just fine. And we all have friends like this. Love to have dinner with them. Great when they're in town and they call up. Wonderful entertainment. Really interesting and smart. And you'd never go into business with them. And that's my opinion of Donald Trump. Donald Trump's reputation in New York is not good. It's simply not good. If someone here can bring me the name of a New York bank that would lend Donald Trump money, I will donate $1,000 to your favorite charity. No New York bank will lend money to him because of the bankruptcies and because of his business record. He is known as Mr. 80% in New York. What does Mr. 80% mean? It means if you were hired as a vendor or a contractor in New York, he will pay you upfront immediately, whatever you want, 80%. And then you do the work, and you try to collect the other 20%. And for 9 months, you won't be able to reach anyone. And finally, you reach a lawyer at his firm who represents Trump. And they will tell you, oh, there's been some problem with your work. It's pretty shoddy. You know, you're really substandard. But you never complained. Well, Mr. Trump is a very busy man. He didn't get around to complaining. Well, can I get the 20% because it's still on the contract? I'm sorry, we're not paying. Well, I'll sue you. Well, we've actually calculated that. We've calculated how much legal bills are in New York or New Jersey or Florida, and we've calculated how much it would cost you to sue for the 20% that you claim you owe us. We owe you. And that'll be more than the 20% you collect. We never settle. And if you sue us, we will take your name through the mud and we will smear you. And we know all the reporters. The point is this: character still counts. We impeached Bill Clinton because he was of bad character. Donald Trump has the potential to do good things for this country. He has the potential to win. But just remember, if we elect Donald Trump, we are changing the nature of the kind of person of character we are electing to the presidency of the United States. And we are not only gaining some things, we're also giving something up.
Well, that's also true if we elect Hillary Clinton as well.
That is why, because of the Supreme Court, I would say, yes, vote for Donald Trump, because with Hillary, you lose the Supreme Court for sure. But we have to walk into this election with our eyes open. And by the way, I'll make a prediction that there's at least a 1 in 4 chance that either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump are not the nominees of their party. Everything has been a surprise in this campaign election year so far. There are more surprises coming. Hillary has to win the FBI primary. And I would remind you, that is a closed primary with 1 polling location and 1 voter.
So does that mean that President Trump will make sure we only pay back 80% of what we owe to China?
He said the Mexicans are going to pay for the wall.
That's a good point. And more importantly, you've known him for 30 years. What's the story on the hair?
Mostly real.
Mostly real. Mostly real. All right, so are these endorsements that I'm hearing from my two favorite
these are observations.
Folks? Are these endorsements to vote for Trump?
If you believe the Supreme Court has been politicized in this country and has far too much power, which it does, and controls much of our life, despite the fact that these are 9 unelected men or women, yes, the Supreme Court is very important, and it's more important to prevent Hillary from making those nominations than anything else. I think that's the single most important issue in this election.
We have, I believe, the weakest sitting United States Senator up for re-election, Michael Bennet. And how Donald Trump does in Colorado has a great deal on whether or not this man's going to be unseated. So is this an endorsement, or is this another one of those, I support him, I'm not endorsing him, but I support him? And I haven't quite figured out the difference.
Well, look, I believe this is the most important election since 1980. I think the stakes here are gigantic. I think for conservatives to say they can't see the difference between Donald Trump and Hillary, with all due respect, I don't think you're looking at this race right. This isn't just a race about the economy. We are in a culture war in this country. And one of the things I really respect about Donald Trump, there's nothing I respect about Barack Obama, is this, that he's taught us something. He taught Republicans something. A couple of things. Number one, you can stand up to the media. And I love the fact that he stood up to the media and he took it right to them, and he said, we're not going to genuflect in front of you people. And people, conservatives respond in a very positive way to that. And I think hopefully other Republicans have learned. What's the old saying that I always know that Republicans are the pro-life party because they always find themselves in the fetal position. Finally we got a Republican who's not in the fetal position. But second of all, what Trump has done, and I believe this is one of the greatest challenges to America today, is the rampant political correctness is completely out of control everywhere in our culture, on our campuses. John and I have seen it so many times. I'm barely able to give a lecture on college campuses anymore, John. and I get.
That's because
I
you
get
never
shouted-
graduated.
I get shouted down. The only place I can give a lecture is at Colorado Christian College, where which is a great school. You guys are wonderful, but the reason I can't give a speech there is because I get shouted down, and I know you've experienced this too, John. And here's the interesting thing: do you know who it is that shouts me down? It's the faculty. It's not even the students. And this left-wing direction of our country, I think Trump has recognized something here,
Okay.
that we've got to take this on.
Steve, you're
So,
right,
yep.
but the cure can sometimes be as bad as the disease or even worse. Look, Boone Pickens and I had breakfast the other day,
What a name dropper.
and I asked Boone Pickens, how long have you known Donald Trump? And he said, I've known Donald Trump for 35 years. And I said, well, what do you think of him when he says he's a conservative? And he said, didn't think of that of him until 2 months ago. If you like what Donald Trump is saying, wait 5 minutes. If you don't like what Donald Trump is saying, wait 5 minutes. Today he abandoned the ban on Muslims. Yeah, gone. What's he going to say tomorrow? What will he change his mind to tomorrow? Look, the problem that Donald Trump has, and this is the single biggest obstacle to his winning an election, a primary, you can take the tactics he used in the primary and you can win 40% of the Republican primary vote, which he did. In a general election, you have to win 51%, because we're not going to have a third-party candidate, and we shouldn't. To get 51%, you're going to have to convince people there's a level of consistency in your planning that you actually will deliver something of what you say you're going to deliver. I know politicians have a bad rap on this, but you have to have some consistency. Donald Trump has adult ADD like nothing I've ever seen before. He not only can't pay attention, he needs attention.
Well, I have adult ADD too, so let me say this.
Well, you're consistent, though. You're a principled conservative.
Here's the reason why, for better or worse, Donald Trump is going to win this election. He's going to win I think he's going to win 35 states. I think he's going to win a very big victory. And here's the reason. And because I think Trump is a better politician, John, than you're giving credit for. I mean, this guy does know how to read the mind of the American voters and tap into the kind of rage they're feeling. But
Enough to get 51%?
It's a very unique talent, and it's a great talent for a politician. But number two, what is the number one thing that Americans are saying that they want right now? If you look at the polls, this has been consistent for the last 2 years. By a 2 or 3 to 1 margin, Americans think this country is on the wrong track.
Sure.
How many of you think America's on the wrong track? I mean, virtually everyone in this room does, right? And even Democrats believe this country is on the wrong track. Hillary is running as a status. She is the last, if you want change in America, she is the absolute last person you would want to vote for, right? She is running completely on a third Obama term. And I don't believe, John, that the American people are going to vote for a third Obama term. Does anybody want a third Obama term? No.
Just remember, I agree with this, Steve, this is a change election. But if the candidate proposing change doesn't have a credible, consistent plan that people think he will actually follow rather than abandon at the next whim, the easiest thing for people to do in this country is not vote. You take 100 eligible voters, only 60 in an average election will vote for president. I think we could have, if we have the lowest voter turnout in presidential history because we have the evil of two lessers, I will guarantee you more Republicans will not vote than Democrats. After all, Democrats know how to invent new voters. I wrote books on this. So that Trump can win, Steve. He can. But he's got to convince people that it's not just the politics of the personality.
I agree.
It's not just, it's actually a plan that he probably will actually deliver on.
John, you made a point that you think there's a 1 in 4 chance one of these two candidates won't be on the ballot. Expand on that. Why? Who?
Well,
How?
the Democrats, well, let's take Hillary first. The Democrats aren't stupid. They're just evil. That's a joke. That's a joke, if there are reporters in the room. They know how vulnerable Hillary is. I mean, she could lose to Donald Trump. So they're going to watch the FBI report that James Comey is going to be issuing and sending to the Justice Department. Now, the odds of the Justice Department indicting Hillary are zip, nada, zilch. They will sit on the report, study it carefully, and wait till the convention goes by and do nothing. But the FBI report will leak. It will be devastating. Now, not legally devastating, but politically devastating. The Democrats are going to watch the polls after it leaks. If she drops 5 to 10 points, they start making phone calls to Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren, president and vice president. If she doesn't lose much, they'll go with her and roll the dice. They will drop her if they can.
That's true.
One thing you need to know, the Republicans have a rule that you're bound on the first ballot to vote for the candidate who won your primary. The Democrats have the same rule, but their rule is slightly different. There's an extra sentence. No delegate can be required to vote for any candidate on the first ballot if they cannot do so in good conscience. If you look up the Democratic dictionary, that says can win in November.
Tell you
Now,
what,
just to finish with Trump. Trump has a different problem. Did you follow the tax return thing yesterday? He had 4 answers in 8 hours. And the bottom line was, I'll release my tax returns maybe if the IRS finishes the audit before November. Look, we're all a family here. So let me say something with as much sincerity as I can muster. Richard Nixon, when he was under audit in the 1970s running for office, gave up his tax returns. Donald Trump today has appointed a committee to vet vice presidential candidates. Corey Lewandowski is the chair of that committee. You know the first thing they're asking the candidates who want to be vice president? Give us your tax returns, the ones he won't give us. Do you detect potential negative 30-second ads in this? I think I know what's in Donald Trump's tax returns. I think I know why he doesn't want them released. Ronald Reagan said trust but verify. Donald Trump is saying trust, you don't have to worry about verifying. We do this at our peril. Here's the deal. Donald Trump is going to have to give up those tax returns. If he doesn't do it himself, the Obama IRS, which leaked Mitt Romney's tax returns in 2012, will leak them for him in October, just before the election. And the odds of someone at the IRS going to prison for that are the same odds that Lois Lerner is going to prison. I'm almost done. We either get them now before he's nominated, or we get them just before the election in November. It's your choice. I talked to the RNC delegate counter. Donald Trump will finish this primary season with about 1,310 delegates, 73 over what he needs, 1,237. There's a movement afoot, and it will come very quickly, for 100 Trump delegates, to write an open letter to him saying, we're happy to give you the nomination, we're happy to vote for you, but we need to see the tax returns. And if you don't, we'll abstain on the first ballot, and our alternates will abstain on the first ballot. So you have to make a choice. Which is more important to you, your tax returns or the nomination of the Republican Party of the United States? It'll be very interesting to see what Donald Trump chooses.
let's get some questions here. Let's go over here. Michael, why don't you stand up and speak loudly, please?
Well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you for both being here.
Oh, it's a pleasure for me to be here. It's no problem at all.
This is my Bosnia buddy. We toured the Balkans last month and survived.
Thank you for both being here. Steve was talking earlier about courage and the political correctness, and you guys are being journalists and having the views that you do and having courage is amazing to me. But I have this sense that you're both saying ultimately you got to vote for Mr. Trump. And I'm sitting here asking myself, is there a limit? This concept, John, you talked about this limit, or this idea of the lesser of evils. Aren't we there? Is there a limit to that concept of the lesser of two evils? That's my question for you both.
Steve, you want to take that first?
Look, let's talk about there's some very serious differences between these candidates on the economy. Donald Trump has proposed the biggest tax cut since Ronald Reagan. That's a big deal. He wants to cut tax rates. He's going to cut our business tax rate to 15%. He's going to cut small business taxes to 25%. Everybody in this room who pays taxes, you're going to get a tax cut under Donald Trump. Hillary wants to raise them. She's going to raise the individual income tax to 50%. She wants to raise capital gains tax to 46%. That's a big difference. I mean, that would destroy the economy if you put that in place. If you put in place that Trump tax cut, you're injecting rocket fuel in the economy. A second area, and this is why I feel so strongly, and it's answer to the question about why do Democrats not care about working class people anymore? Because there is a severe divide right now within the Democratic Party. They have a big problem in their coalition. You have one part of the Democratic coalition that is run by true lunatic left-wing environmentalists. Look, we're all environmentalists in this room. We all want clean air and clean water. I'm talking about these radical people who say, keep it in the ground. We're not going to use our oil and gas and coal and so on. And that's a big problem for the Democrats, because guess what? If you do that, who are the victims of the frontline victims of that policy? Industrialized union workers. You're talking about pipe fitters. You're talking about welders. You're talking about truckers. You're talking about engineers. You're talking about construction workers. One of the things I'd like to see Republicans do to win back these voters, Republicans have to start going into union halls, and I think Trump is starting to do this, and say, vote with us. We're trying to save your job, and these lunatic environmentalists are trying to take them away, right? Whether it's coal mining jobs or whatever job it is, our party, we can win back the blue-collar unionized workers, and that's going to be a big deal. Trump is in favor of a pro-America energy policy. Hillary is in favor of windmills, right? You can't look. I know we talked about this. We can use windmills in some areas, but you cannot power an $18 trillion industrial economy with windmills. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Finally, Trump he's made this clear from the very start. He is going to repeal Obamacare, the worst law that we've seen in 25 years. He's going to repeal it. Hillary says she's going to double down on it. Now, those are two clear choices, folks. I mean, which side of these issues do you stand on? Do you want a tax cut? Do you want to repeal Obamacare? Do you want a pro-America energy policy? I could go down the line. I think on economics, the choice is pretty clear between Trump and Clinton.
As I said, Donald Trump has 9 weeks of a honeymoon to convince all of us that he will run a serious, credible presidential candidacy in which he convinces us he will actually deliver what he says rather than change his mind. And I hope Steve is right. Folks, trust but verify. I'm telling every single one of you in this honeymoon period, I hope Donald Trump sobers up and becomes a more serious candidate. And he can win if he does that. But if he doesn't, wait for the down ticket draft. Wait for the Colorado State Senate to go down. Wait for the U.S. Senate to go down. Wait for House members like Mike Coffman to go down. So here's what your job is. Your job as stewards of the conservative movement, who have supported the Independence Institute, who believe in these ideas and these principles, we have to have an employment application. And certain things are minimal. And I think a good standard, there may be others, is the tax returns. What in the world is he hiding? I think I know, but I'm not sure. If he won't give up those tax returns, I am submitting to you right now, his record of credibility and mood swings is such we cannot trust him with the nomination unless we verify his record. And I'll tell you, he sued someone who wrote a book about him for $5 billion. The case went through 7 years, and it's fixed on whether or not Donald Trump's wealth was what he claimed it was. And every judge who looked at it said he was a completely unreliable witness on what his wealth was, and every witness said he refused to give up documents that would reveal what his actual net worth was. And I think that's only the beginning of what he's hiding. I'm saying it's his responsibility to prove he's a serious candidate. Let's see the tax returns. Otherwise, let's not give him the nomination.
Let's grab another question or two. Anyone out here? Mr. Ignat.
My biggest concern about Mr. Trump is his statements about trying to limit free trade and going to some sort of managed trade. Do you think that he's very to that, or do you think he's talking about it?
Question was the anti-trade of Donald Trump.
So look, I'm a free trader. I think most people in this room are a free trader, and I agree with you, sir. I'm disturbed by many of the things that Trump has endorsed. The idea of a 45% tariff against China, I think, is crazy. But it's also true, look, we have to listen to what not just Trump, but his voters are telling us. We've been trying to make the case for free trade for 40 years. We've been trying to make the case that immigrants are good for the country. And Republicans have said, like, we're going to build the wall, we're going to keep out illegal immigrants, and they just haven't done it. And I'm as pro-immigrant as anybody in this room. But you know what? The voters are pissed off. And these middle-class voters believe that these trade deals are not in their interest. They feel they're the victims of, rightly or wrongly, in many cases wrongly, they believe they're the victims of that their jobs have been sacrificed on the altar of free trade. I think they're wrong about that, but it is true, and here's where I think Trump could make a difference. I feel pretty good about Donald Trump sitting across the table from the Chinese economic minister, or whether it's Putin, because this guy is saying, look, I'm going to negotiate really tough with China. And these trade deals, many of them have not been in America's interest, quite frankly.
agree.
And I would say this, China cheats. They steal. They don't honor these trade agreements. And maybe having somebody like Donald Trump saying, you're going to live by these trade deals or we're going to punish you for it. And maybe it's high time we do this. What we produce in America is we produce intellectual property, we produce software, we produce drugs, we produce patents, all of these things. China steals them, cheats them. The first thing that happens, you send a product
Steve,
over to China, they disassemble
look,
it, figure
Steve-
out how they can
Steve is
remake
right.
it. So my point is that I think there is something to this. We can have free trade, but we better start negotiating better free trade deals, or we're not going to have any more free trade deals.
Look, Steve is right. Donald Trump is not going to be nearly as bad on trade as he says he is. I can prove it. There are 21 of his products that have his name on them that are made in Mexico or China. He's not going to be that bad on trade, because that's where his products are made.
Good point.
Let's do one more question with somebody over here. Yes.
Gentlemen, thank you. I'm a little confused, Mr. Moore, about your comments about Donald Trump's economic policies. You just said one of the big reasons we should vote for him over Hillary. One of the big reasons
Yeah.
we should vote over him instead of Hillary is his economic policies. He'll cut our taxes and
Right.
spur the economy. Maybe there's a good Donald and a bad Donald.
Yeah.
Because I seem to recall bad Donald just a few days ago saying he wants to raise taxes on the rich and raise the minimum wage.
Right.
So can you explain which Donald you're talking about? And how do we know he's a good Donald?
No, I mean, look, it's a very good point. And sir, I've made this point all the time, that there is a good Donald Trump and there's a bad Donald Trump. And when he's good and he's on his message, he's very good. He's as good as anybody I've seen.
Which one takes office January 20th of
Yeah,
next
well, that's
year?
the thing. And when you get the bad Donald Trump, you get these statements, well, I'm pulling back on my tax plan, or, we should raise the minimum wage. Now, look, what he said on the minimum wage is maybe we should let states raise the minimum wage. And actually, I agree with that. We're a federalist system. If the state of Colorado is stupid enough to raise your minimum wage, I live in Virginia. It doesn't affect me. That's a pretty good policy of letting the states do it. I'm not here to apologize for Donald Trump, sir. You're right. He says a lot of dumb things, and there's a lot of economic illiteracy in the things that he talks about. But he is the Republican nominee. He is going to run against Hillary Clinton. And you stack up these two against each other, and number one, I think his policies are a lot better. And number two, I do think he's going to win this race, and he's going to we've tried to build a big tent that brings middle-class voters back into our party. They have abandoned us for the last number of elections. I think he's going to bring them back, and hopefully they're going to be there to stay. Because by the way, one thing that Donald Trump could do, John, in my opinion, that would make a big difference, if he would ever listen to me, I'd say this. He should make an announcement tomorrow. The first thing, when I am elected president, my first Supreme Court nominee is going to be Ted Cruz. We're going to put Ted Cruz on the Supreme Court, and if he did that, I bet he could.
And every Republican senator would approve of that.
Yeah.
I want to thank both John and Steve. Can we give them a big round of applause?
Stay right there. Thanks, John. Good to see you.